What's happening, everybody? Trey here, joined again by my dad Sean, and today on Reactions to the Classics we're going to be taking a look at the Kinks' fourth studio album, Face to Face. We haven't really dove into the Kinks.
No.
We've had a lot of suggestions for them. I've actually listened to their first two records just in my free time, and I dug the sound. I liked what I heard there in the early, foundation. Whenever we got to this kind of marks the start of their golden period, a lot of people think. And if this is your first time stopping by the channel, we appreciate it. Here, Reactions to the Classics, we take a look back at some of the most classic albums of all time and do a detailed track-by-track review of them. So that sounds like something interesting to you. Be sure to hit that big red subscribe button, and if you'd like to link up with us more, we got links to our Facebook and Patreon down below. But let's just dive into the quick facts.
We already mentioned it. Fourth studio album released in October of 1966. First studio album to be written entirely by Ray Davies. Maybe. We'll get to that in the first song. And this album marked the band's shift from their hard-driving style of beat music that had kind of catapulted them to international acclaim in 1964. Ray Davies had suffered a nervous breakdown just prior to the major recording sessions for the album, so obviously that was a challenge. In contrast to the band's earlier raunchy sound, he had started to introduce a new softer style of writing the previous year. In July of '66, the single Sunny Afternoon, also written in that style, reached #1 in the UK, and it proved to Davies and the managers that they could go this other direction and still be successful.
Yeah, and they kept that sound up. A lot of people point to their 66 to 71 period of records as being their, top creative peak, and they were able to just keep developing that sound through the time period. Let's just get into the first track, Party Line, and you mentioned earlier that Davies wrote everything.
Yeah.
Well, his brother here is said to have written this song.
Yeah, and every liner note he gives it to Ray, but Dave claims he wrote it. Dave actually sings this song. It starts out with the telephone ringing. It's the Party Line train. I'm old enough to know, remember the times whenever we call and sometimes have to use the operator, and sometimes there'd be people on your landline, you could hear them during the conversation.
See, I had to look up what a party line is.
Yeah, I figured you did. I didn't have to call and ask the operator to dial it for me. I'm not quite that old. I like this song. It's definitely a different kind of song.
Yeah, it's more poppy-ish compared to some of the other tracks on the record, but I think it's a good way to start the album out. It is interesting that this is such a Ray-dominated album, but yeah, we start off with Dave singing it. So I enjoyed it, and the phone sound effects kind of was intriguing right from the jump. And that takes us to Rosie, Won't You Please Come Home. This was written about their sister, the Davies sister, Rosie, who ended up just fleeing in 1964 to Australia with her husband Arthur. Ray really puts his heart on his sleeve. In lyrics here, he notes, "You don't know us anymore. I would sacrifice all I have to have a happy home once more." Here we had a nice intriguing instrumental backing, almost like I don't know if there was a harpsichord in there, or there were some types of keyboards there, and it gave it a unique sound to it. This is one of my favorites.
It's one of my favorites too. Kind of a little bit of a Doors sound. I realize this is pre-Doors, but there's a few of these songs that I think, maybe there was some inspiration from the Kinks for the Doors. I don't know. This has a very 60s sound to it. The whole album does. This song does, and a few others in particular, which isn't a bad thing. It's actually a good thing. And yeah, one of my standouts too. And that takes us to Dandy. There's speculation that Ray wrote the song in reference to the wild lifestyle of his younger brother Dave. The premise of the song is he's a ladies' man, even with married woman, and there are troubles possibly coming his way, Trey, when you do those kinds of things. So a nice up-tempo song.
Yeah, there's a carefree nature to his lyrics, but then we get a little intense. The music kind of goes down a little bit, and when the climax of the song, Ray's singing that when you're old and gray, you'll remember what they said, that 2 girls are too many, 3's a crowd, and 4 you're dead. So if this guy keeps on this life, it's not going to end up...
You can only tempt fate so long.
Yeah, exactly. It's not going to end up well for him. So I thought that was some great lines by Ray there, and a fun track. And then that moves us into track 4.
Too Much on My Mind.
Ooh, and yet another track that deals with kind of anxiety, and which... we got to remember when this was, 1966. So we're still, obviously the Beatles are coming in, writing some different things. We're still off a little bit from the Doors and some more introspective lyrics.
Yes.
So Ray's coming out here, and songs like this, I think, are a reason that he's heralded as one of the great songwriters of his time. And he really just notes that he has too much on his mind when he's sleeping at night, the anxiety is overwhelming to him, and just some great imagery.
Yeah, and I think people can identify with that. You know, most of us, we can push off our worries, but when we lay down to go to sleep, there's nothing to distract us, and all of a sudden your mind can start racing. I think we've all been through this, and as we mentioned in the beginning, he'd had a nervous breakdown. It's very personal to him, and you mentioned the Beatles, which is interesting because I think this and the final track that we'll get to later on have a very Beatlesque kind of sound to it. So I really enjoyed this one. Next up is Session Man, and Trey, it's just what it sounds like. It's about a session man. It's about Nicky Hopkins in particular, who pops up on tons of 60s albums that we review. He was a master piano session player. He plays piano on this song, which I thought was ironic, and on 4 albums of the Kinks. I really enjoyed this one.
Yeah, I thought it was a unique premise.
Yeah, it definitely was.
And we have a line in there, he's not paid to think, just play. So as a session man, you're just going in and out. They say you're with the rock and roll singers, or maybe you're in the harmonic. Your road just travels in a lot of different ways.
Do what you're told, right? But it's funny, like, you're at the top of your craft, right? Because they're not going to bring you in on the album unless you're the best of the best, but you just shut up and play. That's basically what they tell you.
So I thought that was a nice little track, and then transitions us into track 6, A Rainy Day in June. And this goes back to the more introspective themes here. Really kind of depression is the theme here, because you think June, what do you think? You think sun, we're starting
the beach, we're having fun,
But here it notes that it's actually raining outside, and there's just a darkness kind of hovering over this guy even when he's supposed to be happy, which kind of reminded me too much on my mind. These kind of work synergistically with one another.
Agree, I liked it as well. And as you mentioned earlier, the introspective songwriting was something that was around a little bit, but boy, Ray really pushed into it, and I think that actually helped them really get over it.
And it started again with the sound effect, that thunderstorm. So
again, and it hits in there a few times.
Exactly. So that was pretty cool.
So we finish off side A with A House in the Country, basically about a rich guy who has it all. Doesn't care if he makes everybody mad because he's got a house in the country that he can retreat to. Ray is going to, quote, knock him off his throne.
Yeah, and what stood out to me here was the guitar work by Dave. I enjoyed the instrumental backing on this. It was a little reminiscent of the opener Party Line, so we started in side A with similar style of song. And we start the B side with Holiday in Waikiki. We, again, go back to those sound effects. We start with some water, and here we have an English boy who is going to Hawaii. He's all pumped and excited, but when he gets there, he figures out that stuff's fake, like the hulu dancers from New York City.
There's commercialism everywhere, and you gotta pay to swim.
Yeah, exactly. So here, this was one of the better melodies, I thought, and it was again an interesting premise, and kind of get you thinking, like, we want to go out and travel, and like kind of the paradise we envision.
Exactly.
Ain't so grand.
Yeah, no, I couldn't have said any better myself. Sometimes we play up things, or things are played up to us in this commercial world, even back in 1966. Go here, have this, you're going to be so happy, and you get there and go, I should have just stayed at home. So I thought it was an interesting way to start the side. And that takes us to most exclusive residence for sale. Basically, this guy hits it big. He hits it big, Trey. What's he going to do? He's going to buy the biggest house around. Well, now he goes bankrupt, spent all his money on frivolous things. He's going to have to sell this house, and it just shows you that money can't buy everything.
Yeah, it's got 10 bedrooms, a swimming pool.
It's got it all, baby.
It looks all grand, but at the end of the day, he can't even afford to pay all the servants that are out there. One of the better lines on the record is in here. He took the bottle and drank himself down, then he soaked away all the troubles and let them drown. Again, Ray coming in with some very thought-provoking lines here, and again, just kind of digging in at that commercialism, big time life that we of course see in the most famous song on this album later on. And then we're going to keep moving and trucking in the B-side with
Fancy. And it's only 8 lines, Trey, but it's a great 8 lines, and terrific acoustic guitar and vocals on this, a stripped down
this
track.
Had a little bit of an Indian vibe.
I thought that same thing.
To me, I know it wasn't a
sitar, but that's what I thought too. We don't talk about this ahead of time, but I thought I'm like, wait a minute.
So that again, it's a shorter track, but it did well to just differentiate this album.
That's one of my favorites, actually.
And stand out a little bit, so I dug it. Go on now to track 11.
Little Miss Queen of Darkness, and it's basically, she appears to be happy, Trey, but she's never going to be happy. It's about the front that we put on, the outside world. How you doing? I'm doing great, but she's not really doing great.
And how often do you see that?
All the time.
And again, the theme of kind of darkness and the troubles of life weighing one down. From, you know, we see it all throughout this record, and now where you see it again here. And I thought it was interesting because it was from the perspective of like a woman's getting weighed down here. Then that takes us to You're Looking Fine. The opening lyric is, when I first saw her, she looked all right. Second time that I saw her, she looked out of sight. Goes on to tell this girl that, hey, she's looking fine. He's chasing after her, essentially. I thought this was a fine track, a little more maybe filler-ish.
I thought the same thing. I thought it was so one of my least favorite. Not that it's bad. It's not a bad track on here.
No, but doesn't stand out as much. And then that takes us into one of the Kinks' most famous songs, and by far the most famous on this record, Sunny Afternoon. This here starts off with a very kind of dark instrumentation, like a descending riff here from Dave, and we get going into it, and is Ray's most unique vocal performance here. You can see groups like the Gorillaz in the 2000s take from a lot of inspiration, I think, from this track in particular, and here he does a good job portraying a guy that's complaining a lot about everything that's happening and the taxes. We know in Britain at that time, the high tax bracket was insane.
The Stones talked about it, Pink Floyd talked about it, obviously the Beatles.
He does a good job making us not feel bad for him, because it notes that he, you know, roughs up his wife a little bit. He's a drunk, and he just starts complaining he can't even go and sail his yacht. It's like, dude, you have a yacht. I'm not going to feel bad for you for getting taxed like this. And just the harmonies here were great. Melody was great. I loved it.
I think my favorite song on here, and obviously I know it's a famous song, I'd never heard it, but just what you were talking about, the complexity of the lyrics. This is not some filler song. No. You see the title, Sunny Afternoon.
Yeah,
you might think to yourself, you know, this could be a laid back song, but it is a very intense, and I definitely enjoyed it.
Yeah, you know, any song that takes off Paperback Writer from the one spot has got to be doing something right. And then we close out the album with I'll Remember,
which is a very Beatlesque type song to me. And so you just talked about Paperback Writer. Yeah. One of my favorite songs on here.
It kind of brought you up a little bit, the craziness of Sunny Afternoon. There was also, I listened to the deluxe version that had 4 extra tracks, and all those were fantastic too.
They were.
Dead End Street particularly was nice. So from this time period, they were churning out some great tunes, and that'll take us to our favorite tracks. We both mentioned Sunny Afternoon is up there. I liked Rosie. Too Much on My Mind. There was a lot.
I liked Fancy. I liked Dandy. You know,
Dandy was nice too.
Dandy was nice too.
Rainy Day in June as well. And then that's going to take us to our overall score of the record. What do you got?
Well, I'll tell you what. You throw this record on, and the whole time it just screamed to me 60s. Not in a bad way, in a very good way. Majorly consistent to me.
Yeah, I agree.
Majorly consistent. There was only a song or two that really stood out to me, which is not a bad thing, because oftentimes when that happens, where you a couple tracks you go back to all the time, it's not because they're excellent, it's because the rest of the album's a little so. Yeah. So for me, because of the consistency, I'm going to give it an 8.25.
Yeah, for me, man, this stood out for a couple reasons. One, I listened to this a few times really intently, looking at the lyrics, but I also listened to it a few times in the background, and it's still... It's
a good point.
It did well where if you just had it on in the background, you could just hear the nice melodies and instrumentation. It also rewarded you if you went deeper into the lyrics with it.
And that's hard to find. That's a good take right there.
And so for me, man, I really enjoyed it. I think it was solid from start to finish. I see what the fuss is about the Kinks, so I'm going to be in a really solid 8.5. I'm really excited to see what the boys in the Kinks got.
Everybody tells us the next several albums are banging.
So that'll be interesting to keep on rocking, and let us know down below what you think of Face to Face, what your favorite track is, and as always, Dad, appreciate the research. If you enjoyed this, be sure to hit that big red subscribe button. We upload multiple times a week in a variety of genres. And until next time, y'all, thank you so much for watching. Happy listening, my friends, and we will see ya.